Well, I think that we are ready. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes a todos. Un placer tenerle aquí. I will speak in English for the benefit of our special guest this afternoon. It is a pleasure for the Vice Presidency for Research and Technology to have Dr. Ulrich Mueller as our guest speaker this afternoon. Dr. Mueller earned his Bachelor of Science in Microbiology at the New Mexico State University, and then obtained a Master of Science in Biology at Texas A&M University. His PhD in Cell and Molecular Biology was at Baylor College of Medicine, and then in 1998, is the only year I'm going to mention, he joined the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center at the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, where he performed his postdoctoral fellow. His research focused on elucidating cellular signaling components of a known oncogenic pathway for potential use as targets for cancer therapeutics. So we have here a scientist who at the end of his postdoc decided that he wanted to do technology transfer. So he joined MD Anderson as a technology analyst, and now he is currently the Director of Licensing at MD Anderson. As the Director of Licensing, he's directly involved in the formation and organization of startup companies. He's also in charge of out-licensing university technologies to existing companies. He works very closely with the faculty in coordinating translational research activity, and I think he has done an outstanding work in that area. And he's also very good at establishing network of contacts with venture groups, biotech, medical device, and pharmaceutical companies. This afternoon, Dr. Mueller will share with us his experiences and views on maximizing commercialization strategies for university-based technologies. Dr. Mueller?
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez, for the invitation and for the introduction. I want to thank everybody here at the University of Puerto Rico for inviting me to come and give this talk. It's a real pleasure to come here. I've never been in Puerto Rico before. It's beautiful. Actually, Houston isn't known as being a cold weather city, but this last week we've been imitating Seattle quite a bit. It's been quite cold and rainy, and I'm very happy to be here, although my wife wasn't so happy about it. So, in my talk today, I hope to cover some aspects regarding technology transfer and how we have approached the subject at MD Anderson Cancer Center. First, what I'm going to do is give you an overview of MD Anderson so you understand the perspective that we have and how we approach technology transfer. I'm then going to go through a few slides describing what we see as the changing relationships between public and private partnerships. This is a constantly evolving area, and we try to be very proactive in that regard. Then, with regard to those changing relationships, the question is how can technology transfer facilitate the development of such partnerships? And then I will go through MD Anderson's approach to accomplish that. So first, MD Anderson, for those of you who are not familiar with it, we are in Houston, Texas. MD Anderson was one of the first 3 comprehensive cancer centers designated by the NCI. There are a number now. Obviously, we're hoping to develop one in Puerto Rico. We're consistently ranked #1 or #2 cancer center by the U.S. News and World Report. It's always between us and Sloan Kettering in New York. We're always fighting it out. This year, we're #2. We're hoping to become #1, and we're hoping to build a real gap so we can consistently stay #1. Of course, I think Sloan Kettering may have something to say about that. And right now, our faculty hold more NCI research grants and grant dollars than any other academic center in the U.S. And that is a significant source of funding here at MD Anderson. Just a few numbers to give you a perspective. These were the projected fiscal year 05 numbers. We're already in fiscal year 06, but these were the latest numbers I could get. 75,000 patients in fiscal '05. Very significant growth over a 5-year period that doesn't show to be abating at any form. We're constantly expanding and growing. Some of the numbers here there are quite interesting. Lab medicine, over 7.3 million tests done in 1 year. That translates into $330 million of revenue per year for us. Diagnostic imaging, we are the single largest diagnostic imaging hospital in the world. Nobody else does this many procedures on one campus. And it's accomplished on the Texas Medical Center. This slide shows the main campus of MD Anderson. Most of our clinical work is done in the clinical buildings right here. We have about 700 beds. The vast majority of our patients come as outpatients. They come in for chemotherapy and radiation therapy, but they do not stay at the hospital. And now research wings, these two buildings, this is our newest building, are completely basic research buildings, focused on the discovery of new diagnostic and therapeutic products. What you don't see is where the rest of the campus is, and we're growing so fast that yeah, I don't think you can capture it in one picture anymore. But this entire structure is on the Texas Medical Center. We are one of 7 hospitals on the medical center. Within about a 3-mile square block, there are 80,000 employees that come in to work every day at the medical center. We see about 150,000 patients a day. So it's a very active place, and there's a lot of very interesting work being done on a very small parcel of land. Research expenditures at MD Anderson are growing quite significantly. We've doubled research expenditures over the last few years. And we'll continue to grow. This is the external funding that we get, and this is internal funding, and this is a very important number. We'll look at it a little bit differently. Federal grant money at MD Anderson is almost half of what we receive, and that has been keeping pace. Now, of course, it could become a problem. We're expanding to such fast rates that it may become problematic to keep such a large budget, to keep receiving such high numbers of federal grant money. And one of the things we're having to really start to look at, excuse me, is the diversification and finding research money from other sources. And one of the main ones is internal funding. You'll see that that number has actually grown quite significantly over the last few years. It's interesting. Basically, in fiscal year '05, MD Anderson will be putting $110 million of its own money back into its own research. That's very uncommon for any academic institution. Of course, we're a hospital, so we generate significant revenues, and we can do that with a portion of our margin. Obviously, state funding has decreased significantly. We've gotten an increase in philanthropic money, and then we're working. We've lost some there in private industry funding, but that is also a focus. We're trying to expand that to what we think is going to have to happen in response to what we think this is going to become a smaller number over the years, because government funding will not keep up with the rate that we're growing at. So that's basically an overview of what MD Anderson is, budgets, so you get an understanding of what we do. Now I want to provide a perspective primarily from the University of Texas on these changing relationships between public and private partnerships, and I think this is applicable to just about every public university. First, MD Anderson is a research hospital. We do not have undergraduate programs at MD Anderson, but we are a component of the University of Texas system. So a lot of the pain that is felt by the University of Texas system, we also share, although ours is a little bit different because we are a working hospital with a significant revenue. In fact, we make more money for the University of Texas system than any other component does by far. But I wanted to provide a little broader perspective on what the key issues are in the public-private partnerships. So if we look at the drivers, what we're seeing is that government funding of higher education is not really expanding very significantly. On the other hand, we're seeing more and more patients coming in. Patients, of course, I'm working at a hospital. Students that are coming into the system. And you know, in Texas, this has been a big issue because the University of Texas has continued to try to raise tuition, but there's a huge pressure from the public not to raise tuitions at public universities. And so we have very strong expectations to be very efficient, to be very successful, and to keep on growing, but to do that without any more money. And that's basically what this says, is we have to keep on being leaders in all these fields, but we have to do it without more money. And so we need to find new ways of achieving those mission-critical objectives. So this is, I think, and maybe this is shared here, this is sort of the old model, the old thinking as we see it at the University of Texas, is that an academic institution is an academic institution and it shouldn't mess with private industry. It's tainted if you combine the two. And we hear that quite a bit. These are very different missions. The university is there for the pursuit of knowledge, whereas, you know, obviously the industry has a very different mission. Excuse me. Also in Texas, we have a statutory framework that really makes working with industry somewhat difficult. We have several things at MD Anderson, for example, and this is statewide. We often have companies that have a new therapeutic compound that they would like tested, and they identify a researcher at MD Anderson, clinician who could do some experiments for them. They're willing to fund the research, and then they want to obtain the results and to see if their hypothesis is proven correct. Of course, the company's point of view is, it's my product, I'm funding the work, it should be my intellectual property if you do the work. Well, we can't do that at a public institution because that's considered work for hire, and basically public institutions can't do work for hire. So that's one of these laws that we have to address, and these are big issues when you tell Novartis or AstraZeneca that you're going to have to pay us a royalty on anything we work on. They don't like that very much. Another issue that we face regularly is that all of our buildings at MD Anderson are funded through the sale of tax-exempt bonds. If you build a building with tax-exempt bonds, you cannot do for-profit work in those buildings. Otherwise, the entire university system can lose its tax-exempt status. So again, these are things that we have to be very careful of when we work with companies. Then there is always this risk problem. Universities love to be in newspapers to promote what their researchers are doing or to promote that they've received philanthropic money from a wealthy benefactor. They really don't like to be in the newspapers when it's in association with a company and there's questions of conflict of interest and did they do that research for the company's purpose and things like that. So these things always need to be addressed. So I would argue that there is a new way to look at this and that there are ways for institutions of higher education to work with private industry and to where the two goals can be compatible. I mean, the pursuit of profit and knowledge do not have to be mutually exclusive. One can structure agreements so that both parties can benefit from them. And again, one can structure those agreements so that they do also follow the statutes, the state statutes. And the last one, that risk of cronyism and favoritism, that's a management process. At MD Anderson, we're very careful now that if we're doing a clinical trial, let's say we started a company up, and we end up having equity in the company as University of Texas MD Anderson. The company then does a clinical trial at MD Anderson. Any patient that is a subject of that clinical trial will have a piece of paper saying that the university has an ownership interest in that company and the patient has the right to know that information. So these things have to be managed and have to be transparent, and if you keep it that way, normally you can manage those problems. So some examples of beneficial partnerships, and this is something I think that we're seeing nationwide, is the development of research parks. You can put up space next to a university, sometimes even on university campus, and basically invite companies to come in and provide their expertise and work closely together with scientists. University of Georgia just built a research park on their campus, which has shown some interest from companies. We actually lost a company in Houston that moved to Athens, Georgia now because of that. University of Wisconsin has been hugely successful with research parks, and there have been other examples also. Mixed-use facilities, clinical research, where you can combine clinical and research space. We're doing that quite a bit at MD Anderson. And then there are other possibilities, service offerings to students, faculty, and our staff. We at MD Anderson have been working with one of the chip manufacturers, Cyphergen, in evaluating their systems, and we actually provided some space for them to do some analysis. And in return, they provided us the ability to use their chips for some of our research. And so that worked back and forth, and it's very positive. And to illustrate again how another way that MD Anderson is addressing this, I want to show you a map. That picture that I showed a few minutes ago, this is the main research campus right here. This is on Texas Medical Center property. Now, one of the rules about Texas Medical Center property is you can't have a for-profit entity on that land. Again, it's a not-for-profit entity. The nice thing is that University of Texas basically owns all the land south of the main medical center. And so we have basically developed a research park this is about a mile south of the main campus. So we're calling this South Campus, and then in about 6 or 7 years we're going to start developing Mid-Campus. This is all our land, and we can pretty much do what we want with it, and it includes we can put companies on this land, and we're beginning to do that process now. To expand on the South Park, which we're now calling the UT Research Park, and we're sharing this with the University of Texas Medical School. We already have 2 buildings. This slide's a little bit old. We have a Center for Cancer Immunology that's already opened. We have a Center for Molecular Markers that has already opened. Also in this building is a proteomics core facility. We now are in the process of revving up our proton therapy center. Proton therapy is going to be the next big wave in radiation therapy for cancer. It's a significantly better modality for therapy. We've built our own cyclotron in the building. We have 3 gantries. It costs $150 million to put the building together, but I can tell you that that thing's going to be generating a lot of money in a few years when it's running. Now, interestingly, that was not funded by tax-exempt bonds. That was funded through a public-private partnership in which we worked with an investment bank to put that money together. So they actually invested the 150, well, not the full amount. A large percentage of the money was an investment that was made by private investors to fund the building. Now those investors, the arrangement basically is that the investors can participate in the income that's generated early on. But after a few years, after this is running, and this will be running at full steam by the beginning of next year, MD Anderson will have the capability of buying out the private investors with their expected return. And so our goal probably is about 4 or 5 years after we get it running in full stream. We'll buy out all the private investors and we'll fully own this and be able to operate it at that point. But that was pretty much the only way we could get the money to fund this building, because we weren't going to be able to do it through state bonds. We have some other facilities coming up. We have a Center for Target Therapy that hasn't yet broken ground. And this one's another interesting collaboration. The Center for Advanced Biomedical Imaging Research. This is a partnership between us, UT Health Sciences Center, and GE Healthcare. And basically the arrangement is that the University of Texas is putting in $25 million, GE is putting in $25 million. We're going to build the building together. GE is going to fill it in with all their equipment, and we're going to be discovering the next generation of imaging technologies to be used in cancer research. So this is an example of how we're attempting to address these issues of how you can work together with the private industry in furthering cancer research, because it all meets our mission. Our mission at MD Anderson is to make cancer history, and doing these things with private industry helps us achieve those goals. So let me go back now to give you a little bit more on how technology transfer can facilitate this interaction. Clearly, private industry wants to work with universities in developing and supporting cutting-edge research. There just needs to be a mechanism by which it can be done efficiently so that both sides can benefit from what's being put in. So, I mean, historically, since World War II, universities have been the research labs for the U.S. And federal government put money into those research labs, and innovation came out. Of course, this was significantly enhanced in 1980 by the passage of the Bayh-Dole Act, in which universities were then able to take ownership of anything that was developed at that university through public funding. This provided an incentive for the universities to file patents and then find licensees and then facilitate the process of getting inventions made at the university out into the public for commercialization. So it's very nice that these two missions seem to work very nicely together. And the models worked. I mean, this is a short list. And again, from a medical point of view, there's a number of technologies that came out of university research. Pretty much the major cancer therapies that are on the market, vast majority of those came out of university research. But the problem is, universities don't have the money to do this on their own. And funding always seems to reflect federal and state priorities. It doesn't always match with what we see as being the priorities on the industry side. Funding tends to be for discovery in cancer research work. Funding does not really exist for translational research, from getting that from it's a nice discovery to the point of, well, will this work on a person or not? And so there needs to be more work done in that area. And this is a problem. The lack of funding is beginning to show up, I think, in that we're seeing what the United States used to have the advantage in patents filed. But you can see that these fast-growing economies are catching up very quickly. And this gap and this level of excellence of American universities is potentially threatened by this lack of funding at the early stage. We're also seeing this in early stage capital funding. A seed level funding is basically going away. We just don't see it anymore. Most investors, and for very good reasons, most investors want to put their money in a little bit later down the road now, because they have very precise economic models and they have very precise pressures from their investors that they have to provide a return on investment. And if they do it and it takes 8 years to get to a product, well, they're not going to be able to provide their investors with their money back on time. So we're seeing a problem, and now we have to figure out how we're going to address it. And that's, I think, where university technology transfer offices have to play a very active role. And they're going to be called upon to do so. One is that we need to increase patent filings. We need to find the technologies in the universities that are worth pursuing, and we need to file those patents. And we need to help solve the seed funding issue. And there may be some creative ways of working with the industry on funding some of these things. So, a few ideas. One is that if you create a culture where patent disclosure is rewarded and appreciated, you'll start getting more patent disclosures. Most universities provide incentive in the form of sharing in royalty income that's received through licensing of patent disclosures. But at MD Anderson, we even went a step further. We've added it to our tenureship process. So a faculty member that has a patent filed, that's the same thing as a faculty member having a publication. So it counts as much as a publication at MD Anderson. And that's a very strong incentive. And if that technology is licensed, that equals a grant, receiving a grant. So those sort of incentives work very well, I think, with faculty. Another important thing is to have a very realistic assessment of that intellectual property. To have people that can understand what the industry is looking for, so that the technology, normally it's not, the raw technology is not something that the industry can really figure out and know what to do with. It's the job of the technology transfer department to shape it in a way and form that the industry can understand and can appreciate and potentially license and develop then in partnership with the researchers. It'd be very nice to look for dedicated private development funds to spin out these promising technologies. And in Texas, we've got a couple now. The last legislature approved the Texas Enterprise Fund and the Texas Emerging Technology Fund. That's a total of $330 million. And the first grants, I believe, are beginning to be awarded to small emerging tech companies in Texas. So, the last few slides, I want to give you an overview of our approach at MD Anderson. We've sort of gone through some cycles. We've had some success, we've had some failures, and we reorganized after those, and we're sort of in the process of rebuilding what we think will be a very efficient and very successful organization. So, all tech transfer offices are measured by various metrics, and this was one that seems to indicate something, but maybe isn't very accurate. What we've done here is we looked at the top 10 hospital systems, and these numbers come out of the Association of University Technology Managers, and they do these reports every year. Out of the top 10 hospitals in the United States, we ranked number 4 in receiving research dollars, and these are the 03 numbers. We're a little bit better than that in receiving disclosures, and way better than that, according to average, to filing patent applications. Legal fees are pretty high. So this seems to indicate that we're pretty active. We're doing lots of patent filings, and we're working very hard to try to commercialize these technologies. Some other parameters: deal flow. These are the actual license agreements that were executed in those fiscal years. We went, we've sort of gone. We went through a nice little bubble there, but we sort of were in this average. We're working very hard now, and it's one of my drivers to keep my job, is that this number has to keep going up. Now we have to generate more and more licenses, and we'll be working towards that goal. Startup ventures. We've basically started about 22 companies at MD Anderson since the technology transfer was initiated in 1987. We have a number of them that did go public. We actually still own a significant stake in one of them, which is a gene therapy company that's going for approval of its product this year. A lot of those public companies ended up getting sold to other companies, and we did fairly well on some of those deals in cashing out that equity. We had a real bubble there. And this was a real educational experience. We sort of let our faculty drive us a little bit as far as doing startup companies. Interestingly enough, I think, so there were 6 startups. I think 2 are still alive. They died pretty fast because they just probably weren't the best ideas. And this is now getting to the issue of how we were operating in an office and how we were forced to sort of reassess what we were doing and look at being a little bit more consistent and a little bit more efficient. Because this, putting out a lot of startup companies is nice for reporting to autumn surveys, but if those companies aren't alive 2 years later, you really haven't done anybody a lot of good. And actually, you've created some negative feelings from the faculty. So as you can see, fiscal year 05, we basically shut down doing startups. Again, funding startups right now is very, very hard, and this is part of the reality of the financial situation. Revenues for our office have sort of been around the $4 million mark. What's happening here is that our #1 revenue generator was a drug that's on the market, went off patent. And so the downhill spiral started. So we're actually now working, I can promise you that is the bottom. We're actually going to be in 06 above that. Again, it's my job to make sure those numbers go up. So we're actually already above this number for fiscal year 06, and we're not even, fiscal year ends August 30th, so we're in good shape for this year. But that was accomplished by doing some very specific things. This is the real problem. I showed you that we filed 74 patents in fiscal year 2003. Now this is the problem with filing a lot of patents. It gets really expensive really fast. And again, our office at the time, in fiscal year 00 to 03, was basically working under the direction that we are a faculty service. And so we were basically filing patents for faculty if the faculty told us that this was a good patent to file. We weren't being proactive, we were basically just filing a lot of patents to keep our faculty happy. And then this happens. The problem with keeping your faculty happy is you don't keep your administration happy, because they start looking at your margins. And about here is when they decide, oh, I think it's time to restructure the office, because this is not working. When you're $2 million in the hole, something's got to change. And this was when the administration decided to make a change, and we've gone into restructuring. We're not going to be able to go above the 0 line in 1 year, but we're going to make steady progress so that by 3 or 4 years down the road, we're going to be above the 0 line again. But that's going to take some real effort. So our new sort of structure, our goals. Number one, an amazing thing about MD Anderson is this is ingrained in your head. Everybody that works at MD Anderson knows that you're doing one thing for your job, and that's this. And it doesn't matter what you do at the hospital, this is what you're doing it. And having that very clear focus on why you're doing what you're doing is very good, I think. And obviously, successful technology transfer, successful technology commercialization is a huge help in getting therapeutics to patients, getting diagnostics to patients. We're going to be very active in contributing to the research and education resources. Education is a major issue that we're addressing right now. Myself and our Director of Intellectual Property are going out to the departments now. We're meeting with all the individuals, getting to the process going again so that we can work together in finding the right technologies for patenting and moving forward. And then finally is something a little bit different, which I'll go into just briefly, which is actually refining some opportunities that may exist outside and bringing them to our scientists and going from there. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a slide or two. This is the way we've reorganized our office now. And that we have a vice president of technology transfer that basically oversees all operations. And we've basically split into two arms. One is the traditional technology transfer arm. And we have a director of intellectual property management. We have a patent attorney in-house who's worked at biotech companies in the San Francisco area, very knowledgeable in the process of getting the right sort of protection, the kind of things that the industry likes to see as far as patents. I'm running the licensing arm. I've got a staff of 3 people, and it's our job night and day to get these deals done and roll them out. And we're going to be very consistent, and we're going to do them very efficiently. And then there's a little different arm here, and that's called active venture development. And I'm going to expand on that in just a minute, because this is something that I don't think people have seen very much or at all in University of Technology commercialization offices. So first, our IP strategy is we've got to get those costs under control. And we're doing that now, and we're really looking at our portfolio, really examining it very closely, finding those where we think we can extract value and basically just jettisoning those that we don't think. I mean, if they've been around for a couple of years and we have no interest from a licensee on that technology, it's not worth keeping it going. Everything that's non-licensed, we have to reevaluate. Internationally, we're only going to pursue international applications if we have a licensee. It just doesn't make sense. The costs are way too high. I mean, you can file that first PCT, but once you have to nationalize, the costs are just outrageous, and it's not worth it unless somebody else is paying those bills. And we're going to make absolutely sure that every single one of our deals is going to be involved, is going to bring reimbursement of our patent expenses. The marketing of our technology, this is an important slide. People often ask us how we go about marketing our technologies. And my main response is I don't do a lot of marketing. I do very little marketing. Other than I go to meetings, I get to know the business development people at the companies, and I get to understand what it is that they are looking for, so that if I see it, I know who to talk to. But the big thing is that, and this is an average from all the tech transfer offices, more than 80% of all licensed deals are not initiated within the tech transfer office. They're initiated with the investigator. It's the company going to the investigator who's read a paper or has seen an abstract or went to a meeting and met with them. That's where the first contacts are made. And then, if that investigator is working with us, has filed a patent, they send them to our office, and then we begin the process of looking at licensing. So it's that active involvement of the investigators that's absolutely crucial for success in a technology transfer office. Without it, it's not going to work. Those investigators, they identify the companies, they network at the conferences, they work with us so that things don't sit around, because companies like to move very quickly, they're very agile. And they work with us in having real definite plans for developing that technology to the next steps. And we work very closely with our investigators on these processes. Licensing strategy, my thing is to keep it simple. Doing these very complicated type of deals where you're looking for all different ways to make some money, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm doing very standard deals with companies. I have defined, here's what I need from you, X, Y, Z. It's very clear. One of the primary things is that every single license will generate revenue every single year. And I build that into every deal. So I can project in the future how I'm going to be doing. So I'll know in fiscal year 07 how much I'm going to bring in from the deals that I've already done. And of course, we're going to by doing it efficiently, you can do more. With a smaller staff, we have to be able to be very efficient, but we want to do more than we're doing every year and keep on building. And again, structure the agreement so that we're all working together to actively commercialize that technology. And that can be done. So let me go into the active venture development, and this is the last few slides I have here. This was actually initiated by our Vice President, Chris Capelli. And that is really to basically leverage the strengths of our institution to identify opportunities in the marketplace. Okay, so you saw that we see 75,000 cancer patients a year. That's roughly 2 or 3% of the US market for cancer patients. We do, at any single time, we have 800 clinical trials going at MD Anderson, company sponsored or sponsored by government consortia. If we don't know where the future of cancer research is going, then nobody does. We know the cancer marketplace as well as anybody else in the world. So we, as an office, should really be able to identify the most exciting market opportunities. Not technologies, but market opportunities in cancer healthcare. That's not just therapeutics and diagnostics, that's early detection, that's taking care of cancer patients after they've received treatment. There's a whole huge amount of work that can be done. So what we're doing is we're trying to identify those market opportunities, and then we want to find technologies that might address those market opportunities. And it doesn't matter where it is. If it happens to be sitting at a University of Minnesota, we actually have the ability now to bring it in. We can in-license the technology. We can then do a sponsored research agreement with our researcher who is excited by the possibility to validate the idea. And then if that proves out, we'll actually launch the company and get it going. And we have angel investors and some other people that are already signed on at this point, ready to do this. Because again, we're starting with a market and finding a solution. We're not starting with a technology trying to find a market. And that makes much more sense to most investors. And so this is basically what our office is we have our traditional approach where a scientist brings in a technology to our office, and then we identify where the market opportunity is, and we work together in trying to find licensees. But the active component is that we look for the market opportunities first, find those opportunities, and then bring them to our scientists, and then try to validate them, and then push them through the commercialization pipeline. So that basically is what we're doing at MD Anderson to really maximize the opportunities in working together with the private industry. So I'm going to close with a few myths that we made these slides for our faculty, but I think it's not a bad idea to just throw them up because I think it's very important. This one this one is something I see from a good number of my faculty, is that I've sent you an invention disclosure, I've done all I need to do. You file the patent, you find the licensee and send me the checks when the money starts coming in. It never works. It never ever works. First, the scientist has to be involved in drafting the patent applications because we can't ask our patent attorneys to understand the technology at the level that they do. So if they're not actively involved, we can't get very good patents. And then, as I said before, the vast majority of deals are originated with the scientists. If they're not involved, we're probably not going to get a deal out of it, and we're just patenting something we're going to lose money on. This is something that we hear often also, that we're so hesitant to file patents that we don't file patents until we found a licensee. which of course would be the safest route to go. Then we wouldn't have to worry about patent expenses at all. But that's not the case. Our method is basically filing a lot of provisionals, and the numbers show we're filing provisional applications on 50 to 60% of our invention disclosures, basically saying, okay, fine, we think you have a great idea, let's see where you can take it in a year. If in a year you put it forward and it goes that next step to where we think we have a commercially viable product, we'll then file the full US patent. But if not, we can let it go and we're not out a whole lot of money in the process. And as I had said before, we're not going to pursue international applications unless we have a licensee, because again, it just doesn't make financial sense to do so. And this is another one that really actually got our faculty interested, and they didn't know this at all, is that institutions only make money on patented IP. We make significant revenues by licensing know-how and copyrighted materials, and even more importantly, any company, if they read a paper and they want a cell line or an antibody or anything that's being developed as a research tool at MD Anderson, if they want access to it, they're going to have to license it from me. And companies have no problem paying. I mean, these are not big deals, but you can do hundreds of these deals if you want to a year. And so we're really ramping up our process of patenting cell lines, antibodies, and so forth. Companies are coming to us on a regular basis to do this. And that can be a very nice source of revenue. So that's the summary of where we are at MD Anderson in the technology transfer process. I appreciate everyone coming today, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Right. Usually, the process works best if you work with a technology transfer group to send in that invention disclosure before the publication goes out. It's amazing at MD Anderson. We have ASCO, which is the Society for Clinical Oncologists, is an annual meeting that's held in April, I think. So I can guarantee that when abstracts are due, the day before, we get calls from about 50 or 60 inventors saying, oh, I got to patent this. I got this great thing. I'm sending it to ASCO as an abstract. I got to patent this. It helps a lot if you come a little bit earlier. It's very hard to work that quickly. But yes, you have to for US, I mean, internationally, once you publish it, it's gone. You can't patent it anymore. In the US, you actually have a 1-year window from when you publish the work to file the patent. That law may be changing in the next couple of years. We're not sure yet, but that's basically the process.
In terms of the SBIR program, have companies that been using it?
Oh, a lot of companies use it. Well, so SBIRs are very good for small companies, even companies that we launch. If they're having trouble finding private investment, SBIR is a very nice resource to go after. The approval rate is still pretty high on those. But basically, it is a small business that can leverage some of the resources at MD Anderson. Often the way they use it is they'll apply for the SBIR money. They have to have a scientist who is, I think, 51% employed by the company as the PI on the grant. But they oftentimes, these are virtual companies in Houston, they'll get the SBIR and then they'll fund the research back into MD Anderson through sponsored research money. So that's a very nice way of leveraging some public money that can then come back and fund some research.
Yeah, can you explain what you mean by seed level startup from the first stage?
Oh, sure. Sure, be happy to. Seed level is basically, I've got a great idea. I filed a patent. I need to just get a company started. It's usually money. It's less than $1 million. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars usually. That just to get the couple of $100,000 to get a company started and get some people in it and get rolling and maybe fund a little bit of research to get it going. Once you get to the point where maybe you've done a few validation experiments, then you do the next round of financing, which is somewhere in the $1 million to $2 million range. At that point, the seed level you can often do through angels, individuals that can fund that, or groups of individuals, or these angel groups that fund that kind of work. Corporations don't tend to do that kind of financing. Because corporations are looking at putting larger amounts of money to work. They can't deal with these very small amounts of money for investment purposes. If it's a sponsored research agreement for $500,000, that's not a problem. But investment, it's a totally different arm of the corporation, and they probably wouldn't do that. They'll invest later down the road, and they'll put more money into it to develop it. Yeah, so so you've got a company, you've done some validation work, and now you need the next couple of $1 million to get that to the point where you think you can get towards a commercial product.
The Texas Enterprise Fund that you alluded to, is that locally financed by the state?
Yes.
And what are the regulations of that? Because we have tried that here, not very successful.
What are the regulations? I'd need a couple of days here to talk to you about it, to tell you. It's gotten fairly complicated. But there are, and they broke it out into 3 programs. One was a matching fund program. One was basically a small business sort of investment program, and the criteria for that where you sort of have to show that you're going to create jobs in Texas in order to get the money. And they've then broken it up into types of funding, so biomedical, IT, nano is a big one, obviously, because of rice and everything. So they actually have independent review boards, and then there's a main review board, and it got a little complicated. But I think they've had huge numbers of applications, and I think the first 9 grants are about to be funded in the biomedical field. A government employee. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But there are private investors involved in oversight a little bit too.
There's the John Adams Innovation Initiative, I think, in the state of Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, right.
Are you familiar with that?
Not terribly familiar with the structure of that.
Strategies, but I think would be very useful here is the government will match or put extra funding for any big grant that might have economic consequences for the state.
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked the person there, why the hell are you doing that in Massachusetts? Because the biggest university in the world. And when someone said, remember, he said that because we needed to keep our competitive edge.
Yeah.
Has Texas done something like that?
No, beyond those programs, we haven't done anything like that.
You had mentioned that for some of the start, there was a year when you had like 7 startup companies or
Yeah.
something like that, and that one of the concerns you had was that when they failed, it was going to cause bad relations with faculty members. I assume that there were faculty members of them were actually leaving and going to work in the startup companies. Is that right? And if not, are there instances where the faculty members go and work with the startup company, and what are the limitations that they have on doing that?
Well, there are very strict limitations on our faculty. We've revised conflict of interest policies fairly severely in the last year. If a faculty member wants to, the first answer is no, we didn't have any faculty member leave with the company. Faculty members, I think, to their benefit, and I mean, they sort of wait until the company's well financed. If they're going to jump out of academia into industry, they're going to make sure there's plenty of money in that company. They're not going to take that chance, and I don't think I would either. They'll leave that up to an entrepreneur to try to raise that money, and then if it works, they'll go. But you know, one of our more successful companies, which is a public company, the primary scientist entrepreneur is still working at MD Anderson, has been the benefit of upwards of $25 million of sponsored research from that company. So you know, he's benefited quite well by staying in academics. But because again, you have such a wonderful resource at MD Anderson, it makes a lot of sense to stay because you can test your drugs there. Now, conflict of interest is if you own stock in that company, you can't be the PI on anything that's sponsored by that company, especially clinical work. You cannot have a director level position in the company. You can be on the science advisory board, but that's as far as you can go, and you can't be a full-time employee of the company either.
Other states have resolved that issue. Like, for example, Mississippi changed a charter for the university to allow intrapreneurs and to start up, and that has been very useful for Mississippi. And I know Chapel Hill has also, where the researchers are actually becoming entrepreneurs and remain with their academic position, as long as there's a procedure for the management of conflict of interest. Has Texas tried out the political environment?
Thus far, Texas hasn't looked at it on a statewide basis. It's been left up to the institutions to figure that one out themselves.
No, the state of Mississippi, now obviously the NSCR is the public university.
Mm-hmm.
Because the charter said absolutely no work like this that can be done. A professor, the company has to leave the university. And they just changed that so that, they changed it about 10 years ago. And I know Chapel Hill does it all the time because I was there and the vice president for technology transfer was boasting about how many professors were the CEOs or had the stocks in their own.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I know Stanford. I remember the tech transfer woman at Stanford told me that in year 2000, half their computer science department was gone. They'd all gone and started companies. I mean, they're all back now. But yes.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
What are your recommendations for regarding patent disclosures?
Well, I think that the patent disclosure, I think it's not a bad idea that if the patent office, if the tech transfer office pursues a patent, that is recognized because it is work. I mean, like I said, you're doing the disclosure, you're working with the patent attorney and filing the patent. That is recognized to be equivalent to a publication for the tenure process. But I mean, that's how we've addressed it at MD Anderson. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that has helped. We were getting an average of about 70, 75 invention disclosures a year. We're at about 125, 130 now. So I think it is moving us in the right direction.
I find very interesting the fact that you said that it's really the scientists in these meetings, scientific meetings that you usually go where they get approach. Do you have any mechanism to help those scientists that their abstracts will be attractive, let's say, to those business people that are there looking for that?
Well, I mean, you can do that a little bit. Like, I have very good contacts on the industry side, so I know what abstracts are going to the meeting, and I'll shoot those off to the companies and say, you might want to go look at this poster. This may be very interesting. That's about as much help as I can give. But you'd be surprised how active companies are at going through those posters. They have a full-time staff that's all they do is read papers and look at posters, and so they tend to find the stuff that's good pretty quickly.
And you make your faculty aware that
Yes. Yes, that's one of the first things we talk to them about when they do the invention disclosure and we file a patent. Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you have, say, you do invention and it has no bearing on cancer treatment?
Oh.
Do you still commercialize?
Oh yeah, we actually started up a stent company a few years ago. It's actually a profitable company now. We had a researcher at MD Anderson who has this capability of designing some very interesting new stents. And we filed 25 patents around the technology, put it into a startup company. We seed funded that one actually when we were able to, and it's funded and it's a cash positive company now. It has nothing to do with cancer. Okay. Thank you very much.
I realize that you are presenting cancer, but given your knowledge of future cancer research, do you ever go out and acquire IP that you're uniquely qualified to commercialize?
Well, yeah, if it that sort of falls into our active venture development program. If we think that a technology out there addresses what we see as a market need that we've identified through our expertise at MD Anderson, we do have the ability. Usually we option the technology from that university so that we have 6 months to sort of do some experiments and try it out, see if it works. And if that's the case, we'll put a company around it. The company will actually end up licensing the technology because it's hard for universities to license other universities' technologies. But so we'll form the company. We can do that. We can even form our own companies that are wholly owned by MD Anderson. We have a mechanism for doing that, and the company then will license the intellectual property and then develop it.